There has to be a moment, an epiphany, that makes somebody embark on a journey to write something, especially write something so personal about themselves, to be self-revealing. What was that moment that you said, okay, it's now, and I'm ready? What was the moment that brought you to that decision?
You know, I'm not a teenager anymore. I think you get to a point in your life where you really would like the people who have written so many nice things about you, and also critical things, who you really are. I think some people, we put athletes on a pedestal, and people who've had accomplishments. Those accomplishments come from interacting with a lot of people. It's not your own accomplishments. And some of the things I saw in my life, what motivated me in my life, and what motivates me today is to try to be a better person than I was when I was growing up. I think especially for my kids, who 3 of them are here tonight, you know, it's kind of sad maybe when your own kids don't know who you are, what makes you tick, and I'm hopeful that by reading this book and reading it very carefully, when you grow up in a house that's less than a warm house, I just think it was time to expose myself where I really am.
The book is more than a catalog. It's a telling of your whole experience. But there are some pieces that were probably extraordinarily hard to do. What was the hardest thing you had to contend with? And what one had you rethink your original position when you actually told it and said it out loud and you rethought your position on it?
Life is about relationships, and I think they start with family. And when you grow up in a house like I grew up in, where I didn't want to go home, I was afraid to go home, no self-worth, feel like I've always called myself a stray dog, just hoping someone would come pat you on the head and encourage you or say something nice to you. And I think in the process of doing this, talking about my father, he's not here to defend himself, I hated my father. And you know, I've gotten a lot of people who've known me, have sent me books and stuff, you know, how to forgive your father. I don't think that would have ever happened. But it's also, frankly, made me less of a father, because I'm not really sure what the word love is. I don't understand that word.
Did your dad ever say, I love you to you?
No. My house was, my sister called it the ice house, and it pretty much was that.
When you look at your own life and the experience you had with your father, what part did that play in your first marriage and with your children then? Did you recreate the very thing that happened to you, or were you able to make that separation?
I know the difference between corporal punishment and being beaten. I do know that. And when you're growing up and when you're young, I think all kids, and particularly I have 5 boys, boys are different than girls, okay? Sometimes they don't say things that you wish they would say to you. But I think growing up like that, and being married at a very early age, probably far too young, it was difficult for me because I was trying to be an athlete. That's what I wanted to do. I really wanted to compete at the highest level. That's what drove me. I mean, days of the game, my kids, and they're aware of it. I had a routine. I didn't want to be bothered. I didn't want to be talked to. I was way too damn serious about a sport that had driven me and also given me an opportunity to kind of climb up from the abyss, to be honest with you. And I will forever rue the day that maybe my kids don't realize that I care deeply about them. There was not a thing I wouldn't do. And I'm just not sure I was capable of showing them love the way children need.
So everything was really framed, so much of the book was framed around that maddening feeling you had as a child, that experience in your home. Where was the moment you finally got some relief, where you could purge some of it and say, I can cut my own direction, I'm not going to be forced to live with that burden every moment of my life? Was there a moment that you said, okay, I'm going to really change the steps that I was taking?
Well, Peter, you know, I think I learned an awful lot from my childhood. Nothing is given in this world. You know, it's nice to be born into a family that has wealth and has an opportunity to do things. You know, we never went on a family vacation, never had a car. There's 2 words in my life at that point in time: envy and jealousy. I was envious of everyone and jealous of anyone who had a family, a loving family, and more importantly, people who take a vacation with their families. But I think the thing that it did for me, my imagination, I have a very vivid imagination. I could play all these mental games by myself. In the process of doing those, I was my own best friend. And I just made myself bigger than life because I was talking to myself. No one was encouraging me. And that's really what fueled this enormous desire I had, not to be famous, but just to do something that made me feel good and maybe help others feel good, and particularly at that point in time to stay in West Virginia, which I love.
When you brought your children through their processes, did you really encourage them to be basketball players? Did you encourage them to be super athletes, or were you really wanting to fulfill their own destiny?
I think it's wrong for any father or any mother to take their child and try to make something of them that they're not. And I think having a father at that point in time, you know, I was seemingly bigger in life, thank God for Chick Hearn. And all of us were so probably bigger than we shouldn't have been. But I think with my kids, I would never want to put them in a position, ever, where they would have to compete with their fathers. And unfortunately, sometimes kids think they have to do that. And along the way, I think they put so much pressure on themselves that it's not fair to them, that they have to try to live up to what people think you are and not what's really inside of you. And as I say, there's a lot more inside of me than being a basketball player and being an athlete.
So pain has been part of your life. You've had to contend with that inner pain a lot and those demons. But there was one piece of pain, if you will, that you didn't entirely let go of. You had a brother who died in the Korean War, I believe.
That's correct.
Any loss of a family member would affect you certainly seriously, but that somehow had an even deeper and more profound effect on you. What was the reason behind that?
Probably one of the most difficult things to talk about. I think when you grow up in a household where you know there's one person in that household that's really important, and you know the self-esteem that he has, and he was all that was good in life. And I so wanted to be like him in terms of how people felt like him. I wasn't capable of it because I was so shy and so backwards. But it seemed like, and I'll never forget that day, when I found out he got killed, he was deeply religious. Our house was never the same. It wasn't a great place to be in the first place, but it was never the same. And I think the cruelest thing of all, after I knew he was dead, was that getting letters from him when he was in Korea, a month or two after he was dead, getting these letters was a constant reminder. I think there's one thing that I remember he and his friends were, and this is in the book, they were playing basketball, and I was a little guy, and I was trying to participate in the game. They wouldn't let me participate, and I used some very foul language, which probably at that point in time, I had a pretty foul mouth. Still do, it's in the locker room, by the way. I'll never forget what I said to him. He threw the basketball at him, and I told him, I said, look, you're going to be sorry you didn't let me play because I'm going to be one of the greatest basketball players ever. And I will always remember that because he never had a chance to see me play. And, you know, we pay tribute to our fallen soldiers. We forget about the other ones who've done things for our country. And one of the most difficult days of my life, when he was buried, brought home and being buried, taps every time I hear that word or that song or that whatever it means. I know it's a very sorrowful feeling. And he would be 21 forever, and I hoped that he would see a product of determination and will. He never had a chance to see it.
What was his relationship with your father?
Well, he was a beacon in our family. You couldn't help not like him. And again, there's so many different periods in our family which seemed to be disappointing. And my father really was kind of a public servant. He was very involved in the union where he actually lost his job. And but once my brother died, he did change. He wasn't nearly as bad as he was before. And it affected our family so much. And as I say, when you have someone, it's like a full moon. It's one of the most beautiful things of all. And when he was around, there was kind of an aura about him that he had. If you were around, you were going to talk to him. And it was really a bad period.
You were married quite young.
Yes.
And nobody's really trained for marriage. The schools don't prepare you for that. What's interesting is you had that first marriage. Do you think, and you were a superstar, do you think that when you're married and you're managing a marriage, because you're the other half of it, that those relationships are incredibly hard to keep together because the light is always shining on one of the parties, predominantly, continually, and continuously?
It makes it very difficult for women to be around men who have names. I don't necessarily look at myself as a superstar. I never looked at myself, and I don't look at myself that way today. I just felt like one of those people who were fortunate enough to do something I love to do. But I think marriage is difficult, and it's particularly difficult for someone like me. I do battle depression terribly. The losses affected me greatly, and I was never able to let that go. And I think one of the saddest days of my life was when I left the house, and I left 3 young kids, and even they not aware of it, but I used to drive by the house every night when they were in bed and to see if everything was okay. They never knew that. And but marriage is difficult, and particularly being married to someone like me. I'm not the easiest person in the world to live with in terms of, because I'm so unpredictable. I often felt like a nomad, to be candid with you. My life is constantly different every day, and I wish it were different, but it wasn't.
You're a guy that whenever you played a team, whenever you played a player, you learned something the first time you played. You brought it to it the later time. So in this marriage, what did you learn from the first marriage that you vowed not to make the same mistake in the second marriage?
It's a hard question to answer. I think only the people that are involved with you and intimately can answer that better than I could. I think the thing you learn, and particularly at that point in my life, is that I wasn't playing basketball anymore. I didn't have the same pressure that I felt as an athlete. I had a routine the day of the game. It was sick. It was a sick routine. I did the same thing in my life for 17 years of my life, or 18 years of my life, 4 years in college, and 14 years as a professional player. I had the same routine every day, never varied, because I think that's what put me better in a position to think that I was going to be ready to play a game. And it was a routine. I didn't want to be disturbed. I did not want anyone to talk to me, leave me alone. And that's what some athletes go through, and so others seem to find a joy in it. I didn't find a joy because the only thing I cared about was winning. But I think the only thing I learned differently is I wasn't playing, and it created less pressure and a less tense household because of my mood swings.
Turning a little bit to basketball itself, we all remember you giving Pat Riley his first shot, the real big shot, and you were his friend, a good friend as well. And all relationships have ups and downs. You had some ups, and there are different moments where Pat was at the end of his run in the Lakers situation and was moving on, and it was a difficult moment for you to deal with and contend with as being the boss. How do you keep a relationship with somebody that you constantly have to either measure their performance and you're in a sense their colleague, but you're in charge? How are you able to contend with that kind of relationship change? And still, to this day, I believe you're good friends.
He was probably my best friend and someone who I hung around with a lot. He was jovial, where I was a little quieter and a little bit more reserved. And his opportunity to come coach the Lakers happened in the most unique way. I've never heard of co-coaches in my life. And I just didn't think that was something that would be very smart for us to do. And Jerry Bus gets up and starts talking about, the co-coach, and I said, no, I said, I'm going to be here with Pat Riley a little while until he gets adjusted. And I'm really proud of what he accomplished, but I think Pat in the book explains saying himself, I did not fire him, okay, I did not. And Jerry Buss was always the one who would indicate to me that he wanted to make a change. And I have enormous respect for Pat because he's done not only a great job wherever he's been, but he's also part now of a completely different opportunity for him. Mickey Aronson down in Miami has treated him incredibly well. And what he accomplished last year, I told him, I said, Christmas came early for you last year. He didn't get the Christmas present he was looking for.
When you look at that relationship, and now you look, you bring in, you're responsible for bringing in Phil Jackson, arguably to coach two challenging superstars, and that relationship didn't turn out quite the way you wanted it to. It ultimately was successful, if you will, the bottom line that the team won, but your own relationship you didn't think was a winning relationship. What was the challenge in that relationship?
The coaches, the players, the agents. And you always try to communicate with them in a different manner, knowing full well that his objective is completely different. I think it's one of the most difficult dynamics in any team thing, but I told Jerry, I said, look, we need to stop changing coaches. I said, we've got to put someone here that's going to have a reputation, and I suggested Phil Jackson. I met with his agent, met with Phil a couple of times, and Phil's different, okay, he's very different, and I respect that, but I didn't have a relationship with him at all. It was very evident to me that, he did not want me to, seemingly, even say hello. But it's kind of awkward when someone walks by your office and doesn't even acknowledge you're there, which was fine. I don't have any problem with that. But I think at the end of the day, it was something that somebody said, well, you must have had a terrible relationship with him. He'd have to answer that. I just didn't have a relationship, good or bad. And I think people will pick up on this, and they're obviously going to be critical of me about that, which is fine. I don't care. At this point in my life, I don't care what anyone says about me because I think I know who I am. I know my flaws. But it wasn't the best of times, and he was more important for the Lakers than I was, and it's time for me to go. But I did not leave because of him.
Kobe and Shaq and their lack of mutual respect or mutual animosity or their negative energy between them, notwithstanding what they did on the floor, what did that teach you about your own ability to manage those superstars and those relationships and your own limit to affect results?
To me, you work with people. You don't manage people. I'm not big on titles, by the way. I'm just not. One of the things I wanted when I worked with the Lakers, I wanted a family environment, which I didn't have, okay? There were three women in my life that were so important. They weren't those kind of friends, but three women who I had the utmost respect for. Claire, I don't know if Claire's here tonight, Claire Rothman, who she's run the forum, Joe McLaughlin, who was a jack of all trades, and my late assistant, Mary Lou Levy. I learned more from them, I think, than anyone as far as working with people. But I think probably the greatest lesson that I learned was the fabric of any organization. What are the people you work with? It's not you. They're the ones who do all the hard work and everything. But I think I learned to trust my instincts a lot. And I've seen a number of faces here that we hired when I was over there that are still here, still around. I would tell each and every one of those one of the saddest days of my life was when I left the Lakers. And it really wasn't because of the Lakers, it was because of them.
So then you go to Magic Johnson, who had, Lon Rosen said, there's a reason his name's Magic Johnson, because he did have the magic. What was it that allowed him to have all his players respect them, not resent them? He got the light on him, but he was able to do unique things to, if you will, make people better. What was it about Magic that, not from just being a player, but from his attitude, not his aptitude, that made him Magic?
I want to go back just a little bit and just speak to Kobe and Shaquille. I had completely different kind of relationship with those two people. One of them was young, 17 years of age, couldn't even sign a contract because he's too young. Just an enormously talented kid who all he wanted to do was just play, beat you. And he was like a wild stallion who needed experience, needed to be trained. And Shaquille O'Neal was much more polished. And when I looked at those two guys, I looked at them completely different. Everyone was always complaining that Shaquille was not in shape, that Kobe was in shape. But I think what happened, and you see it happen, and this is why I refer back to it, a question about Magic Johnson. There's a point in a player's career when you have an enormous star, Abdul-Jabbar, who to me was one of the most consummate professionals. He never complained about anything. He never complained about salary, playing time. He just played. And Magic Johnson is Irvin Johnson to me. But with the basketball in his hand, he's Magic Johnson. And we had a very similar situation with Abdul-Jabbar and him. And Kareem was getting late in his career, one of the most magnificent players we've ever had in the NBA. Played the game so easy. I once said to him, I said, man, if you'd only play harder. I said, if you'd only play harder. And he looked at me and I started looking at his numbers, but you could just type right his numbers in every game. But Magic Johnson was not going to be denied. He was going to be the man of this team. And the thing that I most admired about him was that he has a smile that lights up the whole planet. He's accessible. He's someone I admire tremendously, and someone that I just saw grow as a player. And when I see him today, I'm really, really happy for the success he's had.
If your dad was the nemesis, then the Celtics were the devil. How did you contend with that titanic battle and the long disappointment of losing?
Well, I'm not a great loser, okay? I know how to lose because I've been forced to. I've been humbled more than most people as an athlete. And, not because Joe, you were here tonight, but one of the things I want most to try to help with is to see the Warriors beat the Lakers. Now, for a reason. Because if you beat the Lakers, you're beating the best, okay? And we couldn't beat the best. We could not beat the best. And there were two times that I really thought that we should have won. One time we had a better team. We didn't win. It was probably the lowest point in my life, 1969. I walk into the sports arena, 7th final game. I see all these balloons up on the wall. Happy days are here again. They had all this paraphernalia that was going to celebrate the Lakers winning. And I'm not sure what he did with the balloons, but I would like to have made Mr. Cook eat every one of them. It was the most disrespectful thing that I've ever seen to a proud bunch of guys, and that was when I really wanted to quit. I didn't want to play anymore. Okay.
Losing hurts so much, but why doesn't winning actually soothe the losing?
Peter, who was second last year in the Super Bowl? Okay, I'm not talking about basketball. I think most people would know last year. Who was second? Okay.
Pittsburgh.
That's how quick it is. Okay, every day is a soap opera in the sports world. And I think when you play 82 games, writers will write, Kobe Bryant shot 17 for 23, and how great he played, okay? The next night he shoots 7 for 23, and how poorly he played. That's not how you judge a great player. You judge a great player by the totality of his game. And so it's a fickle world you live in, but those things with the Celtics were, oh my gosh, they weren't fun to relive, and I still relive a lot of them today, and that, particularly the 69 game. I wanted to be out there. I drove till about 4 o'clock that morning after that game.
Losing is painful. If you could do it all over again, and if you could change 3 things, one thing, if you change one thing in your life and do it all over again, what would it be?
There'd be more than one, that's for sure. I'll tell you, I want to answer something else first. Today in my life, I'm probably more at peace with myself. the thing that really makes me feel good is to do things and try to help people, try to give back, try to find some kid that needs encouragement. That's very meaningful for me today. But if I look back at my life, the one thing that I probably wish I could have been a better father. That would probably be the one thing I would. But I just try to tell my kids, and hopefully if they read this book, they'll understand that maybe I wasn't capable of doing that. And I guess in my way, my crazy way, it's a way of apologizing for not being a better father. Not in terms of caring about them or loving them, but not for them to know how I felt. As an athlete, I just wish that we had had the training methods that they have today. In the off season, we could have worked on our lifted weights, had all the enormous things that players have to do to develop themselves, because I could have been a much better player quicker. And I wish you could carry the basketball too. I wish you could walk, 2.5 steps. I've seen a lot of changes, and it's a game of skill. But what separates men from boys is this. This is what separates the really good ones from the other ones. They have something special there, and they have something special here. And I admire basketball players so much. It takes a lot of courage to play the game. People don't understand it, but it does take courage. And particularly play that many times. And they're really big players. They're really big players. They're never going to lay down. They'll give their best every night. And that's why I love playing on the road, because a lot of players don't play very well on the road. I was better on the road than I was at home, because I love going in some building and people weren't quite rooting for you and trying to keep them very quiet.
So those players, who was the most challenging player that you had to face in your career?
Well, I read a lot about Larry Bird and Magic Johnson, and people talk about their rivalries. Well, in some ways they weren't rivalries, because they didn't play against each other, they didn't guard each other. And I always felt that the person that I played against personally, that I had the greatest respect for, was Oscar Robertson. He was a tremendous player. I played with him in the Olympic game. And when he first started, he was so far ahead of me, because he grew up in a big city, and I was kind of a self-taught player. Never had the ability to have someone to show me how to do something. Almost everything in basketball, and I think it's such a wonderful game for young kids, you just pick a ball up. Almost everything that happens in a basketball game, except reading players, learning how to compete, learning how to play with players, you can learn by yourself. It's a solitary game, and I was a very solitary person. And as I say, my vivid imagination allowed me to do things I can't believe, but I've led a hell of a life, I'll tell you that.
Was there any one shot that you wake up in the middle of the night and think, I'd like to have that one moment back?
Well, I think probably it's really kind of ironic, because I have 2 dubious honors. They're not someone I'd wish on anyone, but obviously people think you played well enough to was the most valuable player in a losing team in the NCAA finals, most valuable player in the NBA finals on a losing team. Those are not things that are feel-good things. And it's nice that people respect what you accomplished. But I think it was almost like what was going to be in front of me as an NBA player. It was kind of the start of a kind of an ugly side in my career. And the ugly side was not being able to win at the level we wanted to win. That's to win championship. It was in 1959 against the University of California in Freedom Hall. Pete Newell, who was a great friend of mine, one of the nicest men I've ever met in my life. Really a mentor for me, someone encouraged me. The school, we were 1 point behind, and I had the ball at midcourt and never got a shot off. And frankly, people ask you about late game shots and everything. For some reason, if I would have got a shot, I know we would have won.
Two best coaches you've seen in your lifetime in basketball?
Well, I think it's so difficult to do those things. And I'll tell you why, Peter, because basketball has changed so much in terms of coaches having such a real impact on the game. The game itself has changed. You know, they pay more attention to detail in terms of defensive things. They don't shoot as many shots. They have a lot more control of the game. And when we played, there were going to be shots taken, okay? But still it was really fiercely competitive. And I think you have to look at people's success and where they've been and what they've accomplished. And obviously Red Auerbach would be there. Phil Jackson would have to be there. Pat Riley, I think, to watch how he changed as a coach, to me, was dramatic. And I thought it was really a tribute to him that he could mold different players into really competitive teams. Greg Popovich down in San Antonio, I think he does more with less than any coach I've ever seen. And the players seem to have a great respect for him. And again, I'm going to miss people along the way. That Bill Shawn, who I played with, and probably my favorite coach, and he did one of the dirtiest things ever, by the way. He created morning shoot-arounds. When guys, our schedules were very difficult, and you get into a city at, my God, 9 o'clock in the morning, you play the game the night before, and you go to a shoot-around. Trust me, there wasn't a lot of people that would buy into that. But I think Bill will be forever one of the people that I admire most. And lastly, my college coach, who was an ex-professional player, and he brought in another ex-professional player by the name of George King. They're both deceased now. And he was a very good guard in the NBA. And when I was a sophomore in college, because I was always questioning what kind of player I could be. And George just started playing, and the opportunity to play against him, pretty soon I felt that this guy played in the NBA, and he played pretty well, that I was going to be okay. Because when I first started playing, he was very clever and knew all the little tricks of the trade, and got to the point where wasn't much of a contest. I would kick his ass.
Speaking about kicking ass, if you were the commissioner and you had the rules committee today, and you had absolute freedom to change one rule, what would that rule be?
There's a number of things, and obviously it's not popular to voice your opinion today, because you as an owner, and I'm not going to pay a fine of $1 million. And I don't think that you guys want to do that, but if I had a couple of things that I think I would have 12-man rosters. I wouldn't have 15-man rosters. The other thing is that, the privacy of the locker room. I know people like to see things that go in there, but I think to me, it's kind of an invasion of privacy for coaches, but it's part of the growing process for the NBA. I've always felt that was a sanctuary not only for players, but for coaches, and I probably would want to eliminate that.
Before we open up to the audience, I have to ask you one question. What is the secret sauce for the Warriors to have a great team?
They're very close, very close. And I know you guys are both bold. I know you've been entrepreneurs. You take a lot of chances in your life. I don't believe you take chances. I believe you take risks. And I think one of the best feel-good days of my life was in Memphis in I give 2000 or 2001. Memphis Grizzlies, the most games they'd ever won before I came there. And I always questioned myself, was I as good as everyone says I am? And back in my mind, I was always saying no, that I was lucky to work for the Lakers and lucky to work for a great owner. But in the back of my mind, that was the most challenging experience I ever had in my life. It's not the same challenge that we face at Golden State, but the second year there, we won 50 games. We won 50 games, and I will tell you, to see the look on the people's face in the crowd, but with the Warriors, they're unbelievably supported by the fans. They've been so loyal. They deserve better than one playoff team in 17 years. And again, I believe in leadership, and leadership comes from the owners. And I know you and Joe are going to give us the tools to do that. And I don't think it's as difficult as people think it is. it's going to get more difficult going forward as the rules change because no one knows what they are. But I think the thing that makes it difficult, there's one opponent you don't defeat, and that's age. And they're young, they can score points. We need to stop someone, we need to get bigger, we need to get tougher. If we do that, we will win.
That's why you're there. We have time for a few questions.
Well, I had an next door neighbor who really was kind of like a surrogate father for me, and as odd as it may seem, two ladies that I lived with in college, and they were both kind of round, short Italian people, I think a minority. But this neighbor of mine was so nice and so kind to me, and you know, I felt special. He would take me, I love to go trout fishing, and he made me feel good about myself. And I think in the process of feeling good about yourself, you know, makes it less likely that when you go home that you're going to feel better about yourself than when you got home. That and these two ladies. Now, first time in my life that, you know, a lot of people say I love you very easily, and I say that's a tough word for me. But I had these two ladies that the athletes live with in West Virginia University, Morgantown, by the name of Ann and Linda Denard. These women love me. Okay, they absolutely love me. And I did not say a word. I was deathly quiet. If you said a word to me, I'd be embarrassed. And those three people were probably the people that most encouraged and supported me when I felt at times there wasn't anyone encouraging. Yes. Well, strange, I have a son here that I've given all my boys a championship ring, and my son Ryan, it was his birthday, or having a birthday party. And in 1985, the Lakers beat the Celtics. And I gave him that championship ring. Obviously, that was a great day. Pat Riley and Bill Burke, who wasn't able to be here tonight, have about a vertigo, two of my people I love most in life that I've worked with. That was one of the most unbelievably days I'll never forget. But in 1972, when we won, I mean, it just seemed like a magical year. Everything went right for us except one thing. A person I've admired and loved for years, and I can say I love him, was Elton Baylor. He retired, and as soon as we retired, we won 32 straight games. And I've always said all the battles that we had been in, all the disappointments, it seemed so sad that he wasn't there to be part of it. But yet, he was someone who was really important in my life. But Peggy Lee had a song that said, "Is that all there is?" Okay? I think we've all heard it. Frankly, it didn't even feel right to win. It really didn't feel right. I'm so used to the other thing going around. And, it took a number of days for it to sink in what we'd been able to accomplish, but what we had accomplished for the city of Los Angeles, to me, was most important. I love playing for this city. They so embraced me, and watching the Lakers go from a non-brand to the biggest brand in Los Angeles today, to know I played a small part in that, is something I'm really proud of. But I will far more remember the losses than the win. He's pretty damn good. But you know what? I would have loved that opportunity. Well, oh my goodness, I guess you couldn't play as a freshman in college then. And we had an incredible freshman team. In my sophomore year, we had the #1 team in the country. And the University of Kentucky, they used to have great basketball tournaments. I mean, I'm not talking about the ones where UCLA plays William without Mary or Loyola School for the ladies. I'm talking about real competition. And in this tournament, North Carolina, which had won the national championship the year before, Oklahoma State, Hank Ivan, I think might have been in his last year as a coach, Adolph Rupp in Kentucky, and West Virginia University. Well, they happened to pair us against North Carolina, okay? And everyone was dying to see North Carolina and Kentucky and see Kentucky beat North Carolina. Didn't work out that way because we beat North Carolina like they stole something, okay? And to see North Carolina, these players were, the North Carolina, they have these beautiful blue uniforms like UCLA. They were pretty cocky and saying that they were saying in warm-up. One of the happiest moments of my life, because trash talking does not work against certain people, okay? It just plays the opposite effect. And then the next night, Kentucky, oh my God, they're disappointed. And they were disappointed again because we did that was one of the great thrills of my life. Oh my gosh, I'll get in trouble. I thought the Forum was the most intimate building for fans. Much more intimate than Staples Center, but obviously these new arenas are very important for owners to be able to successfully manage and run a team and give it a chance to financially compete with other teams. They're a necessity. But the intimacy of the Forum, watching those 85 teams, oh my gosh, those were incredible years. Those were the best and greatest teams I've ever seen in the NBA, the 85 Lakers. Team reaction, to me, it was nothing because I thought he was getting a rest. We were way behind in that game. And we made a hell of a comeback, but you see him sitting over there. And to this day, I can honestly tell you, I have no idea what went on. I have absolutely no idea. The only thing I cared about, obviously, was winning the game. But, their relationship was not a great relationship, and it's mentioned in that book. And created a lot of controversy. Will had hurt his knee. Obviously, you would want someone in there of his stature at that point in time. But as a player, you're really concentrating what's ahead of you and not what's behind you. And to this day, I have no idea. And I can candidly tell you that is the truth. Well, I'll open how badly I'm injured. Well, there would have been a lot of people fighting for that shot, but there would have been a lot of them to be running away from it, trust me. If you ever go into a great museum and see some of the incredible pieces of art, and even old books, historical books, particularly Bibles. Well, he was a treasure, okay? He was a treasure, and it was impossible not to see who he was. Listen, I'm not that smart, okay? I'm not. But you'd have to be blind. No disrespect to the blind, but you have to be blind not to see his talent. He was an amazing young 17-year-old kid who loved to play, loved to compete. And he was just too damn good. People weren't drafting kids at that point in time because a lot of players were going to school for 4 years. But when we were able to get in a position to draft him, I did call Jerry Buss and I said, listen, I think we got the best player in the draft. And when you look at him today, he's a player for the decades. He's Los Angeles' lone treasure. He will finish his career here, and he will leave a hell of a legacy. Well, you know, the one thing that I always try to pay attention to, and sometimes coaches have a problem with it, you know, your younger players are coming in who are not getting a chance to play. You know, you want to go to them and try to encourage them because they can get discouraged very, very quickly. And in the process of doing that, if they get down, they're not going to have a chance to really play the game, okay? And I've always felt that the one way to impress the coach was to kick the guy's ass you're playing against, okay? And that's one of the things I would encourage our younger players. Look who you're playing against. Go out there and compete against him every day. Do not let him, do not put him in a position where he's going to overpower you. And great players can do that. Don't back down from those guys. And then players who don't play a lot, probably the most difficult thing of all as an executive, if you trade a player that you like, and I think every time you make a trade, you make it hopefully for a reason that's sound. You don't make it because you don't like someone. It's the most difficult thing that you have to do, and particularly players will hate you forever because you traded them because they were part of a very special time. And then the other thing is even worse, is telling a player goodbye. That's the worst. To tell a player he's not good enough to make it, who's had the same dreams, the same goals that you did. It's not good. It's not a good feeling. And those are two things that I didn't like. Those are awful things you have to do. My God. You know what? It would be so difficult to do that. If you gave me 15 names, I could probably do it. But, you know, we've had so many incredible players in this league and been a joy to root for and against, that it would not be good to try to do that. It would be disrespectful for me, people I admire greatly. I probably hold players in a higher esteem, some players in higher esteem than others would, because I've always been enamored by all-around players. If somebody scores a lot of points, that's me. Let's go. If you take the worst team in the league, there's going to be someone on that team that averages 20 points a game, and he might not be able to make a roster of a really good team. But I would hate to answer that question. It'd be grossly unfair. Sorry about that.
Who has the best last question?
I was really very slight when I first started playing. And when I went to college, I was 6'2.5" and weighed about 150 pounds. Okay, I didn't exactly look like the players of today, and it's always surprised me that people list me as 6'2.5". I'm actually almost 6'4.5", and so smaller is not always better. But I think when you looked at me then, and I did play the game with kind of reckless abandon, I love to compete. And I think physically, if you look at me and say, well, he's never going to last. Well, I know Arnold, I knew him very well, and had a chance to, he used to have a radio show in Pittsburgh. This is after I played professional basketball for a while. And I did say to him, I said, Arnold, you were really wrong.
On behalf of Partner Joe Later and myself, we wish you the greatest success.